I'm very honored to introduce our speakers for the evening for KitBash and the Virtual Frontier. They are Banks Boutté and Maxx Burman, both co-founders of and CEOs of KitBash3d. So everybody, please give them a warm round of applause, and we'll get the evening started.
Is it? Oh, look at that. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? All right, I'll take it. Thank you guys for coming out and hanging out with us here on, what day is it? It's Thursday? Thursday, December 12th, 12/12, full moon. You guys are spending it with us? That's amazing.
If you guys are superstitious, stay as far away from the stage as possible.
Full moon, Friday 13th, which is tomorrow, so that's 2 of those in a row. That's gonna be intense for everyone. How you guys doing out there? We can kind of see y'all. We got thumbs up over there, loving the enthusiasm. How many of y'all go to school here? Bazing-zang, sweet. So most of you. How many of you all graduated from high school this decade? Cool. Okay, so then several of you all in our crowd too. Great.
Yeah. Wow.
Sweet. Well, you've been to many a Gnomon live before, haven't you?
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be here with you guys. I went to school here 12 years ago, and Gnomon holds a pretty special place in my heart. I think it was 15 years ago I went to my first Gnomon live event, and that was the first time I got introduced to visual effects and video games. And I remember sitting in the audience and meeting Dylan Cole and George Hull and all these amazing artists, and it was kind of the first time I connected the dots of, oh my God, I love this person's artwork, and they're a human being and have a job that I might one day be able to have. And it's pretty cool 15 years later to complete that cycle and be here today. And thank you, Alex Alvarez, for having us, and seriously, Miranda for setting this whole thing up.
Woo! I mean, Alex Alvarez is the coolest dude ever. So honored to be up here on this stage. I feel like this is hallowed ground in the visual effects and games industry, and it is very exciting for us to. We were talking about this, how this is going to be our last talk of the year, and then we realized it's going to be our last talk of the decade, and we started thinking, what kind of value could we bring here to this space, and what does it mean to finish a decade, and why it's so rare that decades come to a close, and it's been such an interesting one as we looked back on this past decade, and then as we look forward to what this next thing will be. What we hope we can do tonight is really start a conversation about what we see happening in this industry. It feels like it is just about one of the most exciting times technologically to be alive. And there couldn't be more opportunity, and as this whole thing explodes, it's such an honor, I know, for both of us to get to be part of this community with you all. And we hope that the things that we're talking about now is something that we can all continue to talk about over the next decade as this thing unfolds.
Yeah, and I think we're going to do very casual today. We don't have slides, but we do have a slideshow.
Oh yeah, play the slideshow.
Hit
play on the slideshow. Don't
at least get some
don't
eye
let
candy.
them miss out on the slideshow.
Yeah, just some covers.
Oh, look at that. So, anyone heard of KitBash3d? Anyone use KitBash3d? That's what I'm talking about. What do you use it on?
Doing 3D map paintings right now.
You're doing 3D map paintings. Super cool.
Ah.
You know about Max's map paintings?
Yeah, listen to his thing on CG Garage.
Oh, cool.
Oh, nice. Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, what are you doing in here?
What am I doing in here? How did I get? Where are we?
Yeah, because
this place is like Hogwarts. How did I get here? Yeah. I was thinking about that as we started looking into this. It was about the middle of the decade for me that this sort of opened up my mind. It was summer of 2016, I think, and I was working in production as a producer and working in technology, and I on the weekends was coaching kids lacrosse, 5 to 12-year-olds, and we were teaching them in leadership. And if you ever get the opportunity to work with kids, I couldn't suggest it more. You'll learn more about yourself than just about anything else. But while I was out there, one hot summer day, we came off the field from a practice and went over to the dads, and we were really pumped up that the kids were improving so much. And then the kids came running over. 2 of them came, Dad, can we have it? Can we have it? And the dad very begrudgingly pulls out his phone and hands it to the 2 kids, and they run away. And I thought, what was that? He's like, oh, this is the deal. I say, you have to come out here and run around with your friends, and then I'll give you the phone back. And that was the first summer of Pokemon Go. And literally that same week, I went home to where I grew up in Maryland, and I have a nephew, Mason. And Mason was 4 at the time. He's 9 now. And while I was having a conversation with someone like this, Mason pulled my phone out of my pocket, 4 years old, and downloaded a game called Rednecks versus Zombies before I could turn back around and see what he was doing. And I was like, 4 years old, how did you know how to do that, And it was in that moment that I really realized that this is happening, that we are going into the machine, we are going into the screen, and that there's nothing that, whether or not I like it or not, it's here for us.
Yeah, it seems like we've had this conversation a ton, and when we first reconnected to start KitBash, we talked about how we're not here to make a judgment on the ethics of this whole thing. It's happening whether we like it or not. We're spending 12 hours a day in front of a screen average right now.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's we as a people have chosen convenience over quality. No one is suggesting that a handwritten letter is of less quality than an email. But if you sent me a handwritten letter, I mean, literally the handwritten letter you gave me for my birthday is framed on my desk, and I think that is of higher quality. But how many handwritten letters have you sent in the last year compared to how many emails you sent the last week? And so it is a matter of how do we look at convenience as a society and bring that into what we're doing.
Yeah, and we've moved just about all of our day-to-day interactions to this digital space. I think the last I saw was 40% of all couples in America started from online dating.
How about that?
Almost halfway there.
Anyone in the room meet their Darren, bingo, got it. he's a plant, by the way. Yeah,
that's the only reason we invited him here, was just for that one.
And you
can
nailed
go
it.
now.
You nailed it. You can hang out. There's coffee in the back. And that I think is such an important piece of this, that we are now living in a screen. It's every time we have this conversation, it's take a look around. Someone in the room is on a screen. And in fact, multiple people every time, no matter where we are there in the screen. And so if we can just say, okay, we're doing it, what does that mean for us as people?
And when we think of it, we think of that as a virtual world, right? Instagram is a virtual world. It's just a 2D one, and the interface kind of sucks. And that is the world in which we're connecting with each other, and that's the world where friendships and relationships and business and just about everything is taking place. And it sucks. It's interface-wise. It's just a bad interface for it. There's no human connection that really happens when you double tap a photo. And we all have thousands of friends on Facebook, and we feel like we're keeping in touch with them because we hit the like button every once in a while, or write a little forward comment every once in a while.
Well, and let's not bag on where technology is today, because they're kind of cool. Instagram and Gmail are amazing compared to the U.S. Post Office. But what was also super cool in its day, with super luxurious technology, was a candle before the light bulb. And I think we're at one of those pinnacle times where we are going to be heading into this experience. I feel like we're in the candle version of what does 2D versus 3D actually mean for our society, for what if it's fact on the table that we're spending 12 hours a day in front of screens, how much cooler can this get? And what an amazing time for all of us to be in this space thinking about it. It is the people in this room and the people graduating from this school and the people that are working in this industry that are on the forefront of not just movies and video games today, but you're on the forefront of where human connectivity will go.
Especially when we look at that 2D interface entering a 3D world. And that's really why we're here and why we're doing this, and what all of this actually means in context is before we started KitBash, we truly believed that things were going to go more and more into a 3D world, and these 2D interfaces we're using to connect now are moving more towards what looks like a video game today. Mm-hmm. But right now, video games, as much as they're growing in audience, there's a pretty specific objective you do there, versus the idea of shopping in a game engine. And we're seeing things like game engines running architecture projects, running product design, all these different things now being held in a game engine. and it's only a matter of time before a lot of these 2D interfaces that we're dealing with become 3D, and that kind of is the opportunity that we see here and what everyone at Gnomon and people in this industry are on the forefront of.
And you know who really gets it too are kids. If you look at the amount of kids in Roblox, I think it's 1 in every 2 American kids between 8 and 12 are on Roblox monthly.
Yeah.
That is staggering, and that is a virtual environment that they are now existing in and hang out with their friends, similar to if you're in our generation way back there, AOL Instant Messenger, was what you did. You got offline, or you went home and you communicated with your friends that way. And I think that's what's happening now. We're just going to push it a little bit further.
And when we talk about virtual reality, it's kind of a dirty word right now.
Yeah.
But
and it's not a new idea in any way, is it?
no, I mean, that's like Ready Player One and Snow Crash and The Matrix and Neuromancer, all of these different projects. We've been talking about virtual reality for a very, very long time. But I think we underestimated how long it was going to take us to get there. And that's where so much of our focus is now, is trying to figure out how far away are we from that, and where do we currently stand, and then where's the opportunity in that market.
I think it's Tony Robbins always says, people overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. And I think it's a very interesting thought to take that and look at society in general. As we look at 2017, I think it was, when the most recent big virtual reality wave was, and everyone was freaking out, and this is the year. And then it didn't happen, and now today everyone says, oh, virtual reality is not happening anymore. And I think it's just that we've underestimated how far we can come. I mean, if you look at a decade ago, if you look at 10 years ago, when I was beginning, both of us were beginning our career, we were, back then I was working in production, and so fresh out of high school, got here, I was most of y'all's age, and in order to get to the set that I was working on, I had to, from home, go onto a website called mapquest.com and type in the address to where I was going, and then it would give me step-by-step directions, which I could print out on physical paper, and take into the car, and this was absolutely revolutionary technology. I called my friends from a landline and was like, you can't believe this, you don't need an atlas. And I think, now we're here, and where we will be in a decade from now is going to be absolutely crazy.
Well, and if that's how you felt about printing a page on MapQuest, that's how we're going to feel in a decade about the tech we have today.
Right.
You're going to talk about your GPU renderers that, can almost get real time, but you're getting like 2 seconds a frame, and this is a beast of a machine. And in 10 years, you're going to be like, that's barbaric, And you look at what's happening today; it's mind-blowing, the amount of technology that's coming out, and that's happening right now. Because this year we saw Google Stadia come out, Microsoft xCloud come out, both consumer-facing cloud GPU rendering technology.
And to those points, those aren't, cloud rendering is not necessarily, it's not a revolutionary idea today, or it's not a brand new idea today, but what it means as a technology is soon all of the computers that we carry around, our cell phones, will no longer need the box. They'll just be the monitor. And a decade ago, monitors were this thick, and today they're super slick and tiny and small and fast. And that soon will be what we're all carrying around in our pocket. And then it can get a whole lot smaller. It can get a whole lot faster. It can get a whole lot lighter. It can be a whole lot less hot. So whatever the hardware becomes, be it glasses or contacts or on your windshield, where that technology in and of itself has the potential to change the way we do everything if it works.
Yeah, and you get the whole power of that giant box in just a monitor, but not just that, you get 1,000 boxes, a million boxes, endless amounts of really processing power that fits in your pocket and can scale up and down. And just the idea, hardware alone, of being able to create anything you want to create. When we're dealing with 3D right now, you can't really do this work without kind of a couple grand inside of a computer to do it. And when I was starting out a decade ago, you needed a machine that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and right before I joined the industry, it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a box to use 3D on. And as that hardware got cheaper and cheaper and more accessible, we started to see this explosion of content. I think, in 2010, there was probably less than 1,000 video games released. And the last number I saw was 2018 with almost 10,000 games came out in 2018.
And something like 2 years before that, it was 3,000.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just exponentially taking off.
And you have the software that's free. You have Unreal Engine that's free. You have Blender that's free. And you have Unreal spending $1 million to develop more Blender.
Right.
It's crazy. So now if anyone has the hardware and anyone has the software, then what does that mean? And what does that mean for us in our industry? And really what that means is there's going to be a whole lot more people building these things, building games, building CG environments, building VR experiences, whatever it is. But that's a great thing because the more people who build it, the more people who come and consume it. If you're not buying an Oculus Quest right now, you're probably, the only withhold is what game do I want to play on there? But if you have thousands of games on there and some really great hits, then you're probably itching to pick one up. And that's kind of this supply and demand cycle that we're about to enter, is the more content that's created, the more people that come to consume it, which means that it's easier to monetize the content you make, so more of it's made. And that's kind of where we stand right now, and these breakthroughs aren't 10 years from now. That's kind of where we're entering this decade in. Yeah, that's my ramble.
Well, no, I mean, I know we're covering a lot of ground. Does this land with you all? Is this you know, we want this, where we go here, we want to make this an open dialogue because we're really curious to hear what you all have to say. But I think that this is so powerful. And I think it's here at the end of a decade, if we can come together here right before the holidays and sort of celebrate what is happening to the human race, it is pretty magical to be in this position together. Because currently it's movies and video games, but what we're talking about is where the internet will go. And the internet is the thing that has changed the way all of society interacts and exists. And we all have the opportunity right at the tip of the spear here on the bleeding edge at Gnomon, you know, in Los Angeles, in this industry, to come together and connect. And it's going to take a whole lot of us. And it's going to take a whole lot of people to build this thing and get a chance to hit the reset button on some of the tough things that exist in screens and the disconnection and the way it was built. And we can learn from what's happened over the last decade and see if we can have a disproportionately impactful moment here together.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing that's been on my mind as we enter this 2020 and this new decade is if we get the chance to go from a 2D internet to a 3D internet, what can we do better? What does better look like? And what can we learn from the last decade? You know, Facebook was what, 2007 or 2008?
That right? Like when I was a senior in high school, no one had ever heard of Facebook. We are the last generation to understand that, and a couple of us in the room know what it was like to go to high school without social media. And today, 2.4 billion people check in every month to Facebook. That's a third of the world, and only a half of the world is currently connected to the internet. That is absolutely staggeringly mind-blowing in what it means for the ability for people who are working in this space to connect to people in a way that has never existed in human history.
And when they were building that social network, they didn't have the foresight to see the problems that were going to come up. Right, just like now as we build virtual worlds and virtual experiences, we don't know the problems that await us here. But at least we can not repeat some of the ones we learned from them.
What are some of those?
Well, you know, there's a ton, and I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but you see it over and over again from the people who created these technologies who live in regret. What was Steve Jobs wouldn't let his kids have an iPad.
The guy who gave us all portable screens didn't let his children use iPads?
Yeah, and Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple now, is saying that he doesn't let any of his nieces and nephews use social media.
Yeah, Sean Parker was quoted saying, one of the founders of Facebook was saying that that's destroying our youth. Bill Gates limited his kids' time on screens.
So the people who built this stuff are not allowed for my children.
And there's overwhelming data on how it messes with your brain, how screen addiction currently in its state creates, you know, this rampant addiction to dopamine and to the casino mechanics that a lot of these things are built on.
Yeah, and I think when we're looking at how do we build a virtual experience that's better, we're trying to find out how do we explore and try to inspire people to look at other ways to connect inside of these places? How do we connect based on whether that's self-actualization of expressing yourself creatively, of problem solving, of feeling pride in what you're doing, or having like a true, genuine human connection inside of this place that isn't just a double tap for a like. And I think that's kind of what the promise of this new decade is we get a reset button. And how often do you get a reset button on something that 2.4 billion people are using? And we get to wipe the slate clear and say, okay, if we're going 3D internet instead of 2D internet, if we go into virtual reality, if that's what we're doing, and you see Facebook is launching Facebook Horizons, which is a VR social network. So that's the biggest social network in the world, launching a VR social network to try to get people off of this 2D interface into a 3D. And you go, well, if we get this reset button, how do we make sure that we build it right? How do we make sure we take the lessons from the past? And how do we try to inspire some people to design responsibly? And I think that's really kind of why we're here, because we've been rambling, and maybe it doesn't quite make sense why we're talking about all this shit when we run KitBash. And we're going to do a demo.
Well, and I think it's so to the core. You please make your point.
The point I'm trying to make is that we're talking about all this because how often do we get to cross a turning point? And if you really want to know why we run KitBash, why we are doing this whole thing, this is why we're doing it. It's because Banks and I talk about this stuff all day, every day, and we did it before we started KitBash, and we continue to do it as we run KitBash. And why we talk about this stuff is because this is why we started it. We saw that more and more people were spending time on screens. We both believed that 3D experiences were better than 2D experiences. And we thought, how do we propel this forward? How do we get more people to be building digital worlds? Because if more people build digital worlds, then more people are going to come and experience them, and we're going to kick off this cycle. And so we started with figuring out how can we remove technical barriers. Right now, there's 500,000 3D artists in the world. That's like the latest estimate of this whole thing. That is not nearly enough people if we want this to be mass consumer. We're going to need millions of people building digital experiences. So how do we make that happen? How do we make this easier? And then what we do, we started with building models, and then we moved to textures and shaders, but all of those are just taking one step at a time of trying to remove every single technical barrier with this North Star idea that anyone who wants to build a digital world should be able to, with no 3D experience, build a world in one day and share it with a friend. And so with that as our North Star, that's what we're doing and why we're doing KitBash. And part of that is trying to look at where is this going and how do we try to steer if we get any chance of making a slightest little impact in the direction that this all goes in. And luckily, KitBash has allowed us to have a say in some of it. And so that's why we're talking about this, because I think this is what our ask to the artist community is that we're going to make these tools easier and easier to use. We're going to make sure that artists have the tools they need, and we're going to keep expanding on that. And what we're here to do is ask the artist community at large to start to look a little wider and start to challenge yourselves to think, how do I design this better? And if these tools are easy enough, maybe the creativity and the thought power behind this can start to go with how do we build a place for genuine human connection.
Well, and yeah, totally. I think that that is at the heart of what we're trying to do, and kits are a thing that we happen to make today, an effort to enable and inspire the creators of the virtual frontier, as we like to call it. I like the word the virtual frontier. We didn't coin it, but it's something that we use a lot because it feels like the things we worked on or read about in social studies, those times in history where you're right at where mankind was right at the dawn of something they didn't quite understand or acknowledge their place within it. And I feel like that's where we are here. We're sort of in the dark on the crest of this wave, and we're not quite sure where it will go. And I think it's a really unprecedented moment for all of us. This is not about us, and this is not about KitBash, and this isn't about any of us really. It's about all of us. And we're just trying to to join in the conversation here as we figure out what this thing is going to be like.
We also have a demo.
We do have a demo.
Is there anything else you want to add? I feel like
Are we out of time?
we're definitely not out of time.
Is
They're
there
stuck with us
anyone
for-
anything y'all want to say? Anyone have a thing they want to add to this or a question? Yeah.
I might have disagreements with like having I think physical contact's a little better than,
For sure.
But there's a ton of people, a lot of people forget about, like those sick, those who can't move around,
Yeah.
who, autistic people who can't even, this stuff, Disneyland for them,
Yeah.
Completely.
Now those kind of worlds for people who can't get there, it's make them smile,
For sure. What's
Shoot it into their eyeballs if they're not regular eyeballs. We'll figure out a way with that technology.
what's your name?
Armando.
Armando. Awesome, man. Thank you for bringing that up. What do you do?
Another thing,
Yeah.
I found out like everybody wants 3D and all high graphics, the high graphics. But simple 360, because when you're in it, it's still feels 3D. Because I remember a while ago when it was a battle tech game when we were little, and it was just the goggles, right?
Uh-huh.
But you felt like you were in 3D, right? And you're like, it wasn't real 3D until you saw it.
It's amazing how quickly we are to let go of reality and buy into another reality.
And the thing is, there's all this tech. We got to go a little more into the imagination and like just have fun and not be so precise, because I think we're losing a lot on that. And that, just play what we got, go nuts. Because man, it's an open field VR. You're absolutely right. You can just go buck wild and something will come up and somebody will like it out there.
I love that. I think you hit on two really, really fascinating points. First, the use cases of how many different people this could help. You brought up people with disabilities. I mean, think about kids globally.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest problems for kids globally is mentorship. And if you could scale mentorship, if you could teach a computer how to give a kid an actual connection and listen to that kid in real time and help grow with the child, we could change the way the next generation grows up. And if you believe in being part of something larger than yourself, you got to believe in something that's alive longer than you are, and the most impressionable of us are there. So I couldn't agree with you more, Armando, that there are so many different ways that this could help. And also, where you started, where physical connection is paramount. And we are not up here saying this is better than the real world.
Quite the opposite.
Literally the
No,
opposite.
but we are going in
we-
that direction. We have to be careful that we don't get too much in there, because I tell you, it feels better bumping into each other.
Yeah, I think both of us believe that not being on a screen is going to be a luxury in the future.
Yeah, or I'll be cross-eyed. It's not good.
to that point on the idea of the detriment of screens and the loss of communication skills. Kids today spend so much time doing this, they're using less facial expressions and they don't know how to express emotion. And there are all kinds of chemicals that are released in the brain when you get in contact with someone that you cannot have from a screen. And so I think as we go into this space, if we want to really up our awareness of how this works, especially when there's so much that we don't know, we all should be super conscious of our own consumption of screen time. One thing I've done this year that has been perhaps the best thing it's been a good one, is I don't have screens in my house. And we work all day long on screens everywhere, but I go home, I don't have a television, I don't bring the computer there, and I turn my phone off. And just that little bit of relief is starting to feel like a vacation.
No screens at home would be easy for the Gnomon students here who probably never leave this place.
Well, and that is going to be a thing for all of us. Is trying to get off screens will be a superbly valuable commodity going forward as it becomes so much more and more.
Yeah, we're literally founders and CEOs of a tech company telling people to get off their screens.
Well,
We've lost our minds.
Well, no, I'm not saying get off your screens
I'm not
all day.
disagreeing. I'm just realizing
I'm
it.
saying be really conscious of it, because it'll fuck with your brain.
I think that a good alternative that hopefully will blossom in the next few years is augmented reality. So you can actually walk out of your house go, go shopping and it's like, all your coupons will come up, or you go and visit Gettysburg and all of a sudden you see the way the battlefield. Thank you.
Can you say all that again?
Yeah. So, I mean, for the tourism industry, that you could walk Gettysburg and see like a simulation of what was there instead of just seeing a field and trying to imagine it, or just talking to a friend while you're walking, or just having all this useful information come up, but you're still out in the real world.
Yeah. What's your name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, right on, man.
Little known fact, Jonathan was my teacher a decade ago.
Awesome. How cool. And Jonathan, you're teaching here?
Not currently.
Not currently. Cool, man. Well, thank you for
good to see you.
coming and hanging with us. Yeah. If the mic didn't catch it in the beginning, the comment was, how much AR can help bridge the gap and be super useful, because you still get the reality part of it.
Yeah.
Which actually, when we first started talking about this, I was super bullish on VR. This was probably 5 years ago, and we were mashing cameras together and doing all sorts of, projects to try and experiment in the space. And Max that was your point exactly, was AR is going to be the one that bridges the gap, because it gives us a bit of what's here.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen now, though. I think it's any man's game. I think AR ultimately will win, but who knows?
Well, and I almost don't think they're different. I think the hardware, the hardware is not our game, and not anywhere that I feel like I spend much time trying to figure out what they're going to do. But I think it's going to be something that goes on your face, that your hands are now free. Maybe it's on your windshield of your car, things like that you can experience the world as it happens, and then very soon this will fully black out when you want an experience like that. So I think both of those, virtual assets around your life in either a full blackout situation or augmenting the real world are going to be commonplace before this next decade is over.
Should we jump into the demo? We can keep chatting, because
yeah,
I'm going to
okay.
be just placing buildings around, so we're going to have a lot of space for even more questions.
Okay. Who's got a thought? Who's got a thought out there? Sweet.
Maybe some will spark too as we dive into this whole thing.
I'm gonna grab a different chair so I'm not lurking over your shoulder like all the hovering art director memes. Yeah, you do that.
Some of the stuff we wanted to show here on a more KitBash related note is some of the new, and I know you guys can barely see me, but we wanted to show some of the new features coming out with KitBash. We're going to show a couple new kits and build a level. And I think this kind of is where we had kind of hoped KitBash to get to, is this easy and this quick. And some of this stuff is coming out early next year. Some of it will still be in progress, so it's not fully complete. But I'm going to dive into this whole thing using Unreal. That's one of the big things for KitBash next year, is getting all of this stuff game engine ready. And I'm going to be using a Dark Fantasy kit and just block something out and go to town and get into it while we...
You said what kit? Yeah, what's that?
Thank you, head of marketing. Dark Fantasy is a new kit that comes out soon, and
This kit's not out? That's crazy.
feels so natural.
We should have talked about this. I bet we could have come up with something better.
I bet you we could have, but that's also why I'm hoping that you'll just keep talking about random stuff while I build a level, because I'm going to need some time to build this level.
Great. Let's try to not talk about. Let's try to talk about something topical. You, sir, in the back, you said you had a question or a thought, a comment, request, dedication.
I did have a question. It was about this lovely kit that we
So perfect. But now you're on the spot. You got the microphone. You got to come up with something. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Couchot in the back.
Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm actually super fascinated in using Unreal next year.
Have you used Unreal before?
I've tinkered with it. I've had some problems, but super excited that you guys are that us guys are going to be bringing the kits in there eventually. do you think that that's going to spur a lot more users to probably start using 3D that hadn't even been using, let's say, C4D or Maya before?
That's an interesting thought. Anyone in the room use Unreal? Sweet, cool. What do you all think about that? Do you think a lot of people who haven't been using 3D before, because of the resource of Unreal, will be jumping into it? Probably the kids, as you said. Yeah. I think that, we see that so much with Blender. People jumping into Blender and super intense adoption. Do you all use Blender too? You started with it? Nice. And what do you use now? Right. Yeah, no one's teaching Maya.
I think with Unreal, what I'm hoping to see on this, I'm going to answer this one, sorry to jump in.
Answer it.
What I'm hoping to see with Unreal is one of the most easy and intuitive interfaces of most 3D software. The barrier to entry is lower than just about everything. As you can see, just dropping buildings just feels almost like you're playing SimCity or a game. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot to learn before you can dive in, and you don't have to have a super powerful computer for most of these things. So I hope that by opening this up into Unreal, it does a couple things. A, it lets more people learn quickly how to build a 3D world because the software has a lower barrier to entry. But even more than that is the feedback loop. And I don't know if you guys remember the first image you made in Maya, but I remember it taking me days and days of working on it nonstop before I got a single image that I was finally happy with. And that feedback loop of it taking that long before you get something that you're excited about is where most people will drop off. That's when people will go, I don't want to learn this much. I don't care about it that much to do it. If they can get a good image, if they can get be able to run around something quickly, that gives them a higher chance to go and make a second one. And if they go and make that second one, higher chance to go make a third one. And I think this is how we create a gateway to get more and more people into this.
It makes me think of the internet. When the internet was first pitched, they said it was going to be like a cable show with millions of channels, and the cable companies all said, who's going to make all that content? Because they didn't foresee 25 years ago that it would be the users that would then make it. And then the internet proliferated when HTML came out, and when in a pretty short period of time, you could then start making your own representation of yourself online. And that's probably where we're headed with things like this. I mean, the promise of Stadia is that you can use Unreal, you can build from Unreal without a box, right?
Yeah. They're supposed to support Unreal just directly in Stadia, so you should be able to just use it on your phone. If what they say is accurate. We haven't seen it happen yet, but that's what the promise is.
It's kind of like digital cameras. When I was first starting in production, we were shooting on film, and you'd shoot the roll out, and then you'd process the film, and then you'd put it into a digital intermediate, and then you could actually see it. And just that process alone, just the actual film, was a massive part of the budget. And then the film processing was another massive part of the budget. And then it was, the Red camera came out, and for under $100,000, you could make a cinematic looking image without shooting film. And that had never happened before. And then 5Ds came out where the consumer could do it. And then it was literally, we looked it up today, it was in 2010, a decade ago, that the Alexa came out. And that was when all of the last holdouts, the Bob Richardsons of the cinematography world, said, okay, now we're going to shoot all digital. And you sort of saw that, and it's crazy to think that was just a decade ago. And where things go in such a short period of time, what this will be in such a short period of time will look, I imagine it could be something like what Instagram did for photography, where where now someone who's never interacted with this, I mean, how long have you been?
What was that, like 5 minutes?
It's like 5 minutes now.
So you can
5 minutes flat.
where you can actually have something to run around in.
Right, and you're seeing Fortnite is a really interesting example made by, oh yeah, Armando, hey.
I saw you
Well, the shaders are all UV mapped on here, so if I just reverse this, you should just see the, you won't get individual stretching. You might get a resolution error, or resolution decrease, but all these textures are 4K anyways. So they can be scaled quite a bit before you're gonna notice anything. Yeah. And this is all presets, but with KitBash, we give you all the parts. One of the big things, again, is getting artists to be creative. And so if you want to just block out a scene, that's one thing. But if you wanted to make your own castle, that's, we want to at least give you the tools to be able to do that, so you're not starting with just cubes and vertices, and you can actually start to get a lot of details for free. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's the jam. It is fun. It is like watching someone play Minecraft almost.
Yeah, it kind of is, and I'm just gonna kind of zone out and be in the groove here, but so I'm hoping that you can be entertaining, because I'm gonna be pretty boring for the next little bit.
Oh.
What do you also think the implications of this for like virtual production would be?
Ooh,
I'm just picturing, hearing about how they did The Mandalorian, for example, just kind of gets me excited to see this for, who knows, a Harry Potter HBO series. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, Unreal made Fortnite, so they're sitting on lots of opportunity and resource, and they really have a very strong mission of proliferating this. They want to improve the way that so many different things work. And if you look at what they're doing in the film industry, it's astounding. Virtual production, using Unreal and pushing previs so much further, so that you can actually have, like on The Mandalorian, they were shooting on LED screens, where you can have a very, very real-looking image on set, which in the land of special effects is absolutely revolutionary. And finding what this will do in terms of cutting down production costs and speeding up getting to a real image is going to be mind-blowing, and it's happening in collision with the amount of digital distribution that's changing. So we now find ourselves in the streaming wars, and we have so much content being put out from so many different places, which allows us to find, as a consumer, you can find your niche, and you can find exactly the thing you want to see. And because of all of that, all the tools are now proliferating in ways that we're going to see, I imagine, something like the amount of iPhone videos, we're going to start seeing that in CG renders and things like that.
Yeah, like getting to see your matte painting on set would be so cool, instead of a green screen.
Right. Well, and think of what that does for the performers and for the director and the cinematographer and the client there on set to understand it. I mean, if you look at some of the previs that was, has been made over the last decade, and you take a look at it, and then you take a look at what you can do so fast now, it's night and day in what you have to imagine from your minimum viable product that you pushed out there to pitch your project or to get people to understand what it is you were seeing very cheap, very fast and cheap. Now you can push something as far as you want.
There were so many times when, in my VFX career, where I'd go on set and try to explain what the painting was going to be to the actor who was there.
Right.
Just be like, just imagine that, like, there's going to be a mountain over here and a castle or whatever the thing was. It never was easy.
Yeah, entirely.
Yeah, I heard the cockpit shots in Mandalorian didn't even go to post. Did you hear that?
I did not hear that, but I haven't read much on that specifically, but that would make sense. I feel like we're going to see game engine shots slip into trailers, and then you see, oh, that shot's good enough, let's push it to screen, and maybe that's already happening, especially in TV. When you're trying to put out that much content, and TV now is obviously a web series, but when you're trying to push that much content and the budgets are plummeting, and we've watched this for the last 20 years of this industry, where the budgets are changing as the amount of content gets more, the value of each individual piece of content decreases, and the rate that you want to crank stuff out. From a marketing perspective, you see companies are shooting ads for Snapchat. You just don't have the budget to do what you used to be able to do for a Super Bowl ad in a Snapchat ad, but you'll be able to do all sorts of things using virtual production. Right. I mean, yeah, what's Quibi? Entirely series with, I think Spielberg's making one that's entirely shot for the phone. Fascinating, exciting times and huge, huge, huge opportunity.
There's another one. You can build out, if you do your whole, like, say, a show, you build it in the game engine, like scene or whatever, you make it, and then you can put it out in the market, or for a service, put it out for people to change the voices on their own. The community does that on their own.
I've been waiting for that.
You know, and then you just keep the license, and everybody does their own thing, and then you can put a little jiggle in so they could jiggle the animation a little bit, give it a whatever, and then you're watching Fonzie and Starsky and Hutch, but over there in Dubai or over there in Monsanua or whatever, anywhere in the world, with penguins instead of freaking sleigh dogs or dogs, but it's. Yeah, you create a shell and a great story or whatever, and you let other people tag it, like they do anyways.
Right. Remix it. And
But you just, you give them the go ahead, go crazy, and that's how people create crazy stuff when they're all wild.
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, totally. And that's literally how the internet came about. It's open platform and let UGC happen.
Nobody thought about the wackos,
I've been waiting for one of those movies that does the whole previs on camera, like Jungle Book type of thing, to release that game engine world that they shot it with to the public to run around in. Even if there's no game attached to it, the idea of running around, the actual set of the Jungle Book in a game engine seems like it would be so cool.
And to that point, I think to Armando's point earlier too, the brain hardly knows the difference.
Yeah.
You see so many videos of people doing the walk the plank thing, in VR, and you get vertigo from that because your brain sees something and it believes it, and where that goes becomes super interesting. Elon Musk says the argument for simulation is very strong.
Got a custom castle in back there pretty quickly.
So yeah, I was watching you out of the corner of my eye do that. So you took the individual pieces and then made your own castle.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And actually, this is
Good question.
this is a new kit we have coming out as well called Medieval Market.
But before we dive into street level, can we go back just a second? Can you just talk about watching you work and go so fast? Can you just talk a little bit about what you're thinking about as you're placing pieces and how I know so much of your work and what comes so naturally for you at this point is composition and where you're placing things and how you want the eye to read an image across a screen. Can you talk just a little bit about what you're thinking there?
The main thing going through my head is, how do I build a world that looks somewhat half decent in 40 minutes?
Okay, but
while doing that,
right.
half decent, I built a pretty giant castle to have something as a focal point to guide you to it. So there's a couple things when you're designing a video game level is always trying to block the line of sight. If you're looking very far down in a video game level, the computer has to calculate a lot more. These are some of the limitations we have now. That's why most games kind of have you loop around and wind and twist through a world, is so that they can always limit how deep you're seeing in it. But that said, you also want landmarks that pull you towards it. So seeing a massive castle in the background and having a silhouette that's kind of larger than everything else is a target to guide a player to it. And because I don't want you to go in either other direction, because I'm not going to fill those out and I'm only going to focus on this little alley street, I want to do a nice giant castle as a reason to move towards there.
It's interesting, I think intuitively you kind of touched on, but I think it's a really good framing that is not necessarily obvious, where everything you just said is in relation to the player's experience. And you thought, what do I want you to do? What do I want you to think? And how do I want you to feel as you do it? And I think that is so crucial and something that I think we as people skip a lot. Even just in social settings, we don't spend too much time, or perhaps we do, and some of us do, thinking about what kind of experience you want to give to someone else, rather than, hey, I just want to make something that looks pretty for me.
Yeah, I mean, also with matte painting, every time I was doing a painting, I wasn't just painting a sci-fi city or, a fantasy environment. You're trying to create an emotion and trying to guide someone's eye using composition, lighting, color palette, all of those different things. And I think the same thing in creating a 3D world is just like, having a giant silhouette in the distance to guide a player through it. I've kind of preset some lighting up right now that looks a little spooky and using a cooler color palette. And we can swap this out later on and transform this into a happier place if we want. But so much of the tools of being just a traditional painter and a traditional artist carry across when you're building 3D worlds or building game worlds or worlds that you're going to explore in either virtual reality or in a game engine running around in real time. It's all the same techniques of focal point, understanding how to move an eye, and when you get to this place, it's how do you move a player.
Score. I have a question for Ali, if I may. Ali is in architectural visualization. How has Unreal impacted your workflow or those of you on that side of the business?
So I work at Kilograph. We're an ArcViz studio. We have a team of 5 dedicated to working in Unreal. I'm more in ArcViz, the traditional 3ds Max and V-Ray side. So for a lot of projects, that's where we have to start anyway. We'll do still images out of 3ds Max with V-Ray, and then the client will decide that they want to be able to walk around the house, want to be able to experience it in 3D, and then we'll take it into Unreal from there. We use Datasmith to import, and our architecture is much more specific because we're working with architects that design the buildings. So originally that comes from Revit, then have to optimize it, bring it into Unreal. So it's just a different workflow, but kind of the same thing.
Do you find now that clients are getting that sort of real-time experience with the project to be, that they're asking for it more and more?
Yes and no. I think headsets are the problem right now. We have so many clients that just don't want to put a headset on.
Yeah.
And so that's the barrier that we've
What about in a flat setting like this? Do you ever give them a controller and let them move around the building they're going to build?
We'll drive for them, but not so much. And for us, we try not to spend too much time optimizing because we're not trying to push it to mobile or anything like that. So they'll come into the office and we'll do a demo on one of our towers, but it's just not super easy. They have to come to us. It's still a process.
Right. Hardware.
Yeah.
Hardware for a little bit longer, probably.
Yeah.
Super cool. Anyone else working ArcViz? Not in this room, but it's cool. Oh yeah.
But that issue with the headset, putting on the baby, start thinking that there are a lot of people who won't put on the headset. I carry my little headset around, and people are just like, no.
For sure.
Yeah, no. All right. And it's not germs or anything. It's just, but maybe a spherical environment where you can pop your head out. People might be a little easier on that.
Yeah, wrap around screen kind of thing.
Or projection. Do you guys know anything about projection?
Projection mapping.
Projecting, yeah, like a projector. So we don't have to have the headset, so it's right in front of us.
For sure. Yeah, projection mapping is amazing technology, and you're seeing that more in same kind of effects with real time and the LED screens that Chris was talking about. It's an interesting thing. I think the hardware problem today is so very real because most people who put on a headset in the last 2 years had a bad experience. There were many use cases that were life-changing for people in certain, I don't know, any of y'all go in a headset and get in Google Earth?
Yeah.
You can fly out to outer space and make the sun rise and then go home. There are really cool, simple things like that. And then there's all kinds of location-based stuff that is getting really cool. Dreamscape does some really cool things.
But you know what? Just not to
Yeah,
interrupt, but
no, please.
it's going to be the challenge to see who could create something that'll get all those people to buy headsets and put them
Right.
on no matter what.
Right,
And then from there, it's on.
yeah.
Because then, you're like, oh, okay, that was that bad.
Well, in Half-Life,
Yeah, when you get something of that scale, and then everybody's like, I got to get a headset, or
Yeah.
else I won't be cool. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, well,
Today, I hate headsets.
Yeah,
You know?
I know.
Yeah, but the new Half-Life game is in VR. And
I gotta check that out.
been waiting, 15 years for that game? Everyone, and now it's made by Valve, the company that makes the Vive. So there'll be some really interesting things, but currently, yeah, the hardware has failed in a lot of ways. But that's just a stopgap. The hardware has failed so many times in the last 25 years. We were talking about what's remember the Nintendo thing that was orange?
Virtual Boy.
Virtual Boy, yeah, with the arms and you had to stick your face in it. The guys who made Second Life, they were trying to make a VR headset. They just couldn't make it small enough. They had the metal rods that hung out on here like you were in Clockwork Orange, and and then they eventually made one of the most successful open worlds in an effort to get into the space. But eventually, at some point over most likely the next 10 years, someone's going to crack the hardware nut, and it's going to be very interesting. Please.
Like destruction ready or effects ready?
They're not. In terms of, there's a couple different ways to look at that, because you can bring these into Houdini. I'm not sure, I don't think they're all water sealed or airtight or whatever the prep is for Houdini. I'm not sure it would be too difficult to prep them for it. Unreal has Chaos, which is kind of their new engine for this whole thing. And that's something that we're looking into, as well as PhysX, and seeing how do we get our library working with that, and what's the proper way to do that. So that's something that's on our roadmap and something we're looking at, but we haven't figured quite what the right way to do that yet is. And with that, I think when we look at the KitBash library, there's a lot of ways. We get emails all the time of like, hey, I use this weird one-off 3D software that no one's ever heard of. Can you make kits for this software? And I'm not saying that's what VFX-driven is. I'm just saying it's kind of a good example of how we approach things. If we're going to do something like switch over to PBR textures or get everything game engine ready for Unreal, we have a couple things where we have to figure out, what's the best way? What is the gold standard for an Unreal asset? Because KitBash really tries to constantly hit whatever the production quality is. So that means talking to all the different game studios with Unreal and seeing what are the pros and cons and what's everyone's different pipelines and what's the most common setup that works for everyone's pipeline. And then we have to look at how do we automate that, because we have over 5,000 assets in our library now, and we don't want to just release the new kits with these things, because if we release Dark Fantasy and we have all these features, but you need some Sci-Fi City, well, that kind of sucks that because the Sci-Fi City came out 3 months ago, you can't get the genre you need in that. So the way we go about all this, find the gold standard, figure out how we convert a kit to it, automate the process, update the entire library, and then release a new version of the kit for everyone. And with that, we've updated the kits 3 times now, and part of Unreal and PBR materials and things like that are part of kits 3.5, which is something we're hoping to launch early next year.
But awesome point.
For those updates, do you update do you up the polygon count and remake everything, or?
We don't usually ever have to update the polygon count. We build at mid-poly. I think we're pretty efficient with polygons. I think an average kit is anywhere between 5 and 10 million polygons. And while this kit isn't super heavy in terms of polys, they're used efficiently enough where the textures, and I don't have displacement turned down on any of this, but if you were to turn displacement on, you could get camera right up next to it, and it should hold up without having to add any polygons to it.
Looks pretty cool on there.
Also, everything you're seeing is, I'm not going to bake the lighting on this scene just because we're gonna plow through making a level. So this is all just preview lighting, and yeah, no displacement or anything like that. But with those tools, you can usually get even closer to photoreal. Also for this, we give you, just like the other kits, for these prop kits, we give you all the pieces individually. So if you want to go to town on some set dressing, and you can go in here and have actually individual, even down to like the apples and loaves of bread and all of that stuff. So there's quite a bit to be able to play with, and you should be able to make just about anything you can think of fantasy-wise with these two kits.
And why we were joking about what these two kits are is this is probably actually the first time we've ever shown a kit before we released it. And so both of these kits are not yet out.
Banks and I have some weird obsession with surprises. We love surprising each other. We love surprising the team. And so since we started KitBash, we kept what kit was coming out was the most coveted secret because we really wanted to surprise the KitBash community.
And Chris in the back is the mastermind behind the hints. If y'all, and if y'all are a couple of head nods, if any of y'all are on social media with us, that's been something really fun. Is we like to put out hints, and the community guesses what's coming next, and also a really cool way to see what other kits people want.
Yeah, I mean that's where we source our list. All the hints and all the disappointment when we don't put out the kit someone wanted. I'm just, at this point, this is...
You're making dinner.
This is where you can just get lost in it, because it's actually pretty damn fun, and you start making up little stories in your head. I used to do this with map painting all the time. Whenever I'd start a painting, especially if it was some super detailed painting for a film, let's take a destruction city or something, I'd always come up with these little stories in my head for each building and how it got destroyed. And no one would ever know these. And I'd be like, oh, the helicopter hit the top floor and then it spun around and the tail hit over here and then it scraped down this building and this. And all these little stories that would kind of entertain me through the hundreds of hours I would spend on those paintings. And while no one ever knew that, I like to think that people see that it has some rhyme or reason to the whole thing.
I think that in and of itself is a classic sort of artist dilemma, where it's the thing that makes it stand out. It's not necessarily that you'd understand why that spoon was there, but because you or whoever was making it spent the time to really live inside of it is why it feels authentic. And I think you see that in the great artists everywhere. It's really awesome talking to modelers who do that. Who a lot of the modelers that we work with have those kinds of stories about all of their kits. And there's those little narratives are riddled throughout the thing of how they and why things look the way they look.
Yeah, I bet you. I mean, there's so much about these kits that we don't even know, because you're right. They all have their own stories, and a lot of the time they'll send us, especially our texture artists, love putting Easter eggs in the textures. And sometimes we catch them, sometimes it happens a lot later of look at that. It's like a Coca-Cola can with the KitBash logo instead of Coca-Cola on there. Little things like that they throw in there.
We talked about in each kit having a tiny little character, like a Where's Waldo kind of thing, where we'd hide the character and then have an Easter egg hunt for everyone.
I kind of wish we just told everyone that there was a hidden character somewhere in there. But then,
find the Waldo, find the astronaut.
Or maybe
we should do
trying
that.
to throw you off. Maybe there is one in there. Yeah, I don't know. It's maybe they cleared the table off and they were reading.
So I have a question. Are these customizable? Maybe I can see this accelerating the production, process, as you said, in set dressing. But if I wanted to use them in an animated film, stylized or something like that, can it be the textures? Can it be customized?
Totally.
Or something?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the nice things also about these kits is the shaders are set up pretty nicely to be pretty quick to swap out. If we even just use the ones that come with Medieval Market, you know, if we just wanted like a red fabric on here instead, you can just drag and drop the materials that you want throughout. You know, swap that out. I actually have a couple other materials saved on here. So if we wanted to, let's say, make one of these buildings instead of this kind of, I don't know, classic European fairy tale type of thing, maybe we wanted to go, you're not going to load? Wow. You know, I feel like we did pretty well without a tech glitch. There we go. You can quickly switch this up and you know, get something that looks like a more, you know, mossy or jungly type of castle. Swap out the roof. It's pretty drag and drop for the whole thing. Also, if you wanted to just make this whole place into a happy place, it looks a little evil right now, but you can quickly just drag a couple texture shaders on and quickly get into something that has a totally different vibe to the whole environment. This starts to take on a bit more of like a Moroccan feel or something rather than like a European feel, or even Greek.
It is a whole lot more fun than watching someone use Maya.
We've done so many streams with KitBash, so much time on Twitch, where we were, you know, watching someone doing something in Cinema 4D, and I don't know Cinema 4D, and both Banks and I had no clue what the hell the person was doing for 2 hours on the stream. And I think some people did, and the C4D users loved it, but we're just seeing a ton of like sliders with names that none of us know.
Well, and it's a lot of like, let me change the indice of refraction here to where this is so much more intuitive.
I think that's really the goal here, right? Is can we make it so that anyone can understand how to do this, can see how they can do it too, that it looks fun to do. I think that's a really important thing when we talk about getting more people through the door and starting to explore this stuff. Is how do we make this look fun?
I want to also say we love C4D and Maya.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, I take back everything I just said. I love C4D. Yeah. They are our good friends.
Speaking of the show, has anyone seen any of the KitBash shows before? Nice. Were you ever in the chat with us?
I haven't really tried to watch it yet.
Cool.
He's a lurker.
Passive, got it.
Get him.
If we haven't done that we didn't do that pretty much at all this year, but we had such a good time doing that. I loved that we streamed every week for the first 18 months of our company, and we did the festivals, if you remember those. We had actually Alex Alvarez, headmaster here, came on, was a guest on the festival with us last fall. It's such a good time. We did the festival, and then we did the Kitmas Bash. Do you remember the Kitmas Bash? Have any of y'all been in the KB3D contest on Instagram? So if you download the free mini kit, we do a new free mini kit every quarter, and if you download the free mini kit and build something with it and then post it to Instagram using hashtag KB3D contest, you enter into the contest. And we've had artists in 75 different countries. Thousands of artists compete in this contest. And what we did our first year was we took our first two contests and we pulled the top 8 winners from both of those and brought them into a tournament and did a live streamed head-to-head tournament where we got art directors of Star Wars and Spider-Man and had them live coaching we had a 19-year-old kid in the Philippines live streaming with Nick Hyatt, and they're going through it, and they're competing against another coach and player as they built a world in real time. It was just thinking about this stuff. I loved doing that. I would like to do more stuff like that.
That's what we're doing
Yeah.
right here. It's pretty much
Right now?
right now.
You know what? I missed the chat. We need the chat. Hey, all right. How about that? Okay, so you set dinner.
Well,
You
I
set
had,
dinner.
I had to
You-
make
you
a
lit
little
some
a
candles.
romantic candlelit dinner. You gotta go, gotta go for it. Is there anything that you guys want to see in here? I feel like I've just been kind of dawdling on here, wanting to show just kind of how quick it is to build the level, to kind of make something that feels alive, how quickly you can kind of customize it to, even though this isn't like a preset, you can quickly start to set dress even down to some small details, or if you want to quickly fill up a street, you can do that. We can make this place look happier, we can make this place look more evil, we can make it look however, and it's pretty, how much time has this demo been? Like 30, 40 minutes?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of the point of all of this, and the goal of this is how quick can we get something that at least feels like a playable level, and we could add effects and stuff like that to take it one step further, but I am not an effects person, and I'm sure all of you guys are very well versed in effects, and I'm not an authority on the subject matter.
Yeah, I didn't really have a question about this specifically. I was thought you meant like in KitBash, like for the future of KitBash.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you guys have any plans to do any like image-based lighting for the windows in any models and stuff, because that's what I'm going through right now on the Neo Tokyo kit, like putting like image-based lighting on all those for skyscraper windows and stuff. And then also, if you guys have any plans to do like VDB sets for like clouds or anything like that.
We've talked about VDB. I wouldn't say we have plans for them, but it's something that we're definitely looking at and interested in. In terms of image-based lighting, if you're talking about like HDRs to reflect off of.
Well, like HDRs in the windows, that kind of thing.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
It's like, what is it, like the facing angle so that it looks like 3D when you're moving around, even though it's a 2D texture? Is it that?
There is that, and then just putting it in there so you get like some realistic looking lighting from like skyscrapers.
From
and stuff.
inside.
Ah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
That's a great
That's
idea.
something we haven't looked at before, but that sounds like a great idea.
Send us what you're doing.
All right, yeah,
Yeah.
almost done.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm curious, do any of you have a kit suggestion? Because God knows we could use some more kit
More ideas,
suggestions. We're building a lot right now, so we're always looking for ideas. If you do, let
Pirates?
us know.
Pirate, oh, good. Have you done anything with like mid-century modern or gooky or retro space age type stuff?
That is not something that was on our list. That's awesome.
It's a very cool idea.
Yeah.
Mid-century modern.
We haven't done anything like that, have we?
No,
Do
but
we
we're
have something designed?
not yet. But there's some fun ideas around that, and I think that's a really great idea. What kind of work do you do?
Oh, I developed the renderer for Boutté,
Oh, nice. Right on.
and did the render for Lightwave 3D as well.
Sweet.
But I had personal projects in mind that would sort of
That benefit from that, yeah.
question.
What kind of personal projects are you working on?
Just sort of a retro space, conquest of space as it might have been done in the 50s.
I love
Super
that
cool.
stuff.
Yeah, I love that stuff too.
Environments, sort of things like the LAX theme building, Space Needle,
Yeah,
but also the really into the googie type coffee shops and just everything from the late 50s, early 60s.
super cool. I think that would be awesome.
Have you played a game called Headlander, or have you seen one? It's very cool style. It's very cartoony, but it kind of looks like Austin Powers 60s in space. It's a very cool retro style and kind of pushed to a very cartoony style. It's made by the same people who make Psychonauts. So it's very cartoony and stylistic, but really fun.
On this subject, in the back there, in the back corner, is Darren Butler. And Darren is our new head of 3D. Yeah,
Howdy.
indeed. If y'all are familiar with Darren's work, Darren spent 15 years at Blur as a CG soup and VFX soup. We're incredibly excited to have him joining the team with us. And so all of the new kits coming out will be under Darren's purview.
Yeah, and I'm extremely excited to be on board with you guys in general, and I'm looking forward to, I think we're in early January, sitting down and doing our big brainstorm session of all of the kits for 2020. We already have a few in the works, but obviously we're always open to ideas, because we have good imaginations, but probably not as good as all of this room combined, so the more the merrier.
Yeah, crowdsourcing how we're doing this, I think, is the wave of the future, or is the wave we're all on. Darren, as you have been involved in so many different types of pipelines, how have you seen the cinematics pipeline in a studio like Blur, well, in Blur? How have you seen it change in the last 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, we used to, with these assets that are coming out now, we used to have to model everything from scratch. So modeling was a big time suck for the industry as a whole. We'd end up making the same screw over and over again. We'd make the same building, the same skyscraper, that same rock. I can't tell you how many rocks I sculpted. And now that there's asset libraries like what we're helping to create, this is one of the most monumental things, and the time savers. Like, look at how fast Max is able to be throwing this whole scene together. Like, this wasn't even possible 10 years ago.
Yeah, totally. And so in the pipeline, how much time, I know this is a hard thing to ballpark, but how much time is put towards, and how many man hours, or how much of your team is put towards creating the raw assets?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably 60%, 75% of the workflow. Once the modeling was always the biggest time suck. So now that once you have an art direction and a lighting direction, that's usually a little faster. Obviously, in a bigger animation studio where the animation is a big factor and characters are big factors, what I was working on mostly as a CG supervisor was dealing with the environments, dealing with art direction, dealing with concept artists. But so that being said, yeah, I mean, 75% of the environment, 75% of the time is always thrown into the environment itself. So knowing we can wipe out 75% of the workflow already, that just gives the artist even that much more time to focus on the art direction, focus on the lighting, focus on the storytelling. So it's a big saver.
Yeah, on the fun stuff.
Yep.
Not that this isn't
That was
super fun.
One of the things when we started KitBash, well, it happened years before that, but it was something that I never forgot. I was at Digital Domain, and we were working on a movie, and the guy sitting next to me was just the most talented modeler. And I think it was for Real Steel. He did this amazing Black Hawk helicopter. He spent months on this Black Hawk helicopter. And the movie ended, and we started up on Iron Man 3, and they asked him to build the same exact Black Hawk helicopter to the model number. It was like a Black Hawk B476E, and it was like the exact same one. And he was like, I just spent 4 months on this. Can't we just get that one? Oh, no, we already archived it to tape. And he had to rebuild that whole thing. They finished that, and I think they were on a Fast and the Furious movie after that, and they asked him to build the same exact Black Hawk helicopter for the 3rd time in a row, 3 projects in a row, and he quit. And it was just one of those things of, is this really how we're gonna do this? And this isn't like a small studio either, this is Digital Domain. You think about how many assets are built there and how many incredibly talented people built them, and then they get thrown away every single time. And that was one of those things of, there has to be a better way. We cannot continue to go down this path. Let's start building these and distributing them and keeping a coherent library.
It's crazy to just think about when you're moving at that speed and how fast everything has changed, how there are so many inevitable inefficiencies, and it's really hard to put in a system to manage things like that and to look to the future and so often in the heat of production, you're just trying to get through your crunch, and it's very hard to sit there and then think, oh, well, we should build a system for the next 10 projects. It's like, we may not make it through this one.
Sure. Yeah. I think Blur is actually the only studio I've ever been to that actually kept a library. Like, they were the only ones I know who actually had a categorized, labeled, named library from their past projects.
Yeah, Armando.
You guys heard of Real Illusion's iClone?
iClone?
iClone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because they have their own. I like their model because you speak of pipeline, because I got their whole thing where you could just basically everything you build you can export and it's yours, and it's got a huge library of already made assets. But the better thing, it's got another place called the Marketplace, which is like a swap meet. It's all users.
That's cool.
And they put a lot of free stuff, but they sell on their own using points. Points is they redeem for cash, and it gets, like I said, it gets people in there moving around and building little cheesy worlds. But to them, it's not, because
right.
So somebody went out and created this little pig guy, and put a little skeleton in him. Yeah, he's a little quality, but man, it's perfect for my little movie.
Yeah, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Minecraft is such a great example.
Exactly. That they're not even thinking, and these kids, these imaginations go off because it's so easy to access.
Right.
And you're right about, look at this, we're building this world here. And it was,
42 minutes in?
yeah, that's ridiculous.
Right.
And on these screens.
Armando, what do you do?
I'm independent. I like to do pre-visualization and using that, iClone and Maya to go into the Unreal. I think that I want to start doing more of the once the animation gets a little better in Unreal, I might dive in. But right now, I like the iClone thing because I got this export, and it has a 360 renderer, which I love.
Right.
And then you're in it, but going into Unreal, I have to think about textures, and the iClone is a real-time engine. I can see effects right away. I got a blowtorch that I drag and drop, and it's glowing. You got to have the right video card, but you're watching flames glow your screen, which in Maya you couldn't do. You had to go wireframe just so you could get real time. Mm-hmm. Real time's the best because you get to see it go right. Because look at the little guy moving.
Right.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much of this is just rendering.
And we're used to it. Imagine these other people. When I get a kid, some neighbor, and I get him on that, and I make him move the mouse, and he makes a little skeleton move around, you see the faces they light up.
Right.
And that's, because they don't, to us, this is everything. To them, every day, but to them, it's like, wow, magic.
Yeah, it's that feedback loop that Max was talking about. If you have to wait 12 hours for your render, it's hard to get that.
Render,
that satisfaction.
Man. Render. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
awesome.
you guys got a good vibe going on with this thing, or right position, as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
thanks, man.
Because you guys did talk about ethics.
Well, yeah, thank you for continually joining in the conversation. And please, anyone also feel we haven't heard too much from the deep right field here. Actually, while we were on this with Darren, if I could keep picking your brain for a second, I'm sure there are a lot of people in this room that can take a lot of insight from you. And if it's all right, I'll just ask you a couple more questions. You have been involved, obviously, in visual effects and video games for a really long time, and you've been surrounded by this, and I know you have multi-generations in your family involved in this. Your brothers and your nephew's a student here, right?
Correct.
And so, what advice do you give to kids who are now in this space where they're saying, "Hey, I want to go work for Blur"? I can't tell you. We just got back from Europe where we did so many talks at art festivals, and you'd get into portfolio reviews with people, and they all come up to you and say, hey, I want to work at Blur.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a great goal. What do you say to them?
Yeah, strangely enough, I get a lot of, well, when I used to work at Blur, I would get a lot of those emails.
Yeah.
I would get a lot of students, a lot of amateurs, a lot of people who are just getting introduced to the whole 3D world of animation, cinematics, films, and I get asked that question quite a bit. And I've always tried to keep the same answer of, because this is such a robust industry, and take this school right here, for example, there's not just one little niche that they focus on. The broad education is getting dabbling into each little software, dabbling into each artistic avenue. But then my suggestion is always get a little bit of education from each piece, because you don't know what you're going to like the most. And then once you find out what your favorite thing is, then that's when you kind of go down that avenue and really dive deep into it. The beautiful thing about Blur, in my opinion, has always kept me and stuck me there, is they are more generalists. You go to some bigger studios and you're really only going to be just a lighter. You're only going to be a modeler. You're not going to be texturing that model. All you're doing is pushing polygons around, or you're just painting textures. Whereas at Blur, you got the ability to really be a generalist and work in all platforms. When it would come to specifics of if you really wanted to come to Blur, is what I basically did to get into Blur. Was I took concept art from a former concept artist there by Feng Zhu. I took his concept and I made that concept into a 3D image. And I remember having a conversation with Tim Miller, who's the owner, and he goes, oh yeah, I remember seeing that concept, because that concept was a pitch for another project that they didn't end up getting. And even in the back of his mind, he recognized that because he had seen that before. And so it immediately drew him to my image, which I was really fortunate about.
That's an awesome tip.
Yeah.
You brought up two things there that I think are so important. Is, you know, I feel since I was 20 years old, pressuring myself and everyone around me at that age to know what you want to do. And there's this feeling of like, oh my God, I'm almost out of school and I better know exactly what I want the next 40 years of my life to be like. And then you get a little bit further down the path and you're like, oh, that's just not how it works. You know, so few people in their 40s are doing what they were doing in their 20s. And the limiting of yourself and your experience, I think, can be so crippling if you put that pressure on yourself. But if you can conversely stretch yourself and look in all these different avenues, you'll often stumble upon something you had no idea that you were going to fall in love with, and then all of a sudden there's a career. You know, you could stumble into a whole section of this business which is expanding in crazy ways, and find something that you didn't know was going to be your thing, and now all of a sudden you have a path. And then you look like you got something.
No,
Oh,
I'm listening.
are you just hanging?
Yeah. Keep going. I like it.
Okay.
As long as they like it. I mean, they could boo you off at any
I mean,
moment.
they're still here.
Oh, I
which is-
still cannot believe
I
that.
feel good about that. You know, and the other piece on this is something that
targeting something that you really want to achieve. If you're going for a certain studio, then, I mean, if you love cartoony stuff, you want to work at Disney, I would suggest putting together, if you want to do a character modeling for Disney, that's what you should be putting in your portfolio.
Well, and I think that the idea of doing work on your own and being a self-starter and taking initiative and finding an idea like you had, where you took a concept that the studio had already made and built it for them, was like, hey, I can do what you need here, is the key. And we've so many of the artists that we spoke to on the tour talk about that. Ben Morrow told a story of how he was doing a very specific thing on The Hobbit, and he really wanted to model, and he really wanted to do character design for them, and no one had given him that opportunity. And so what he did is he, on his own, on his free time at night, he went home and started designing wolves. And then instead of going and saying, hey, look, I'm a wolf designer, let me in, he just put it on his desk. And then people came by and they're like, whoa. And literally 2 weeks later, he was designing the wolves in The Hobbit. You know, just from doing the work. You know, we often talk about, let's work for the job we want. not the job that we have.
Exactly.
And how do we take this as seriously as we possibly can? You know, not what is available to us today, not what is expected of us in the workplace, not what everyone else we know is doing, but what's the absolute best we could do with this? And then if we do that on everything, then all of a sudden you get to find out what you really give a shit about. And we call it, you know, the shower hours, the time that your mind goes when you're most relaxed. What do you think about? You know, and then if you can do more of that, and you do more of that so well, eventually you'll find a way to make that your life. And, you know, in a world today when you can do anything you want, you know, digital distribution and the internet has made it so whatever the thing is that you're passionate about, you can find a way to make that your life. Then you just have to pour yourself into it and find the thing that really drives you. And if you do that today, there's never been a better time in human history to make happiness your North Star. You know, and along with that, all the other achievements come. You know, but if you're not happy, none of the money or the success or the trophies on your wall will matter if you don't choose the thing that actually fuels you, not the thing that you feel like you're supposed to do. Did we get was that a snap? That's what I'm talking about. We get poetry in here. How are we doing on here? Have we reached a final destination?
I feel like it is a world that was done pretty damn quickly, and hopefully at least shows how easy it is. He's hovering, I know. Definitely collision stuffs, but then again, I think the collision might be worse on the tables. This is definitely still the work in progress on real builds of these things,
Well,
but
and this is the 55-minute version now.
definitely.
Collision's easy, man.
But yeah, that's kind of a world at least that we can run around, and some of the stuff that we're doing with KitBash with shader swapping, some of these new prop kits, some new kits, and Unreal stuff that we're going to be launching early next year.
Yeah, for our 3.0 update, we made native files for Maya, C4D, Blender, and then Octane, V-Ray, and Redshift. Did I miss anyone there?
No.
No. And then what we're hoping to have out early next year is an update that supports game engines natively.
Yeah, and a ton of new kits.
A ton of new kits.
Yeah, and I'm excited to do a lot more of these smaller things. I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous to double down on building apples and mugs, but I feel like these are the things that tell a story that you kind of get lost in. And I think hopefully this stuff can just become more and more fun. God knows I hate UVing, and I hope that no one ever has to do that again. But instead just focus on just building out a scene, a world, a story, and create a place that you can run around in and hopefully quickly be able to share with a friend eventually, and whatever hardware that may be.
One person I would love to point out to you all is the gentleman here to our left. This is Alex Ship, and Alex is our content director at KitBash, and he's making the CG renders that you see in the trailer, kit trailers, and really cutting all sorts of stuff. I'm not even sure what he's shooting here, but he's always doing something. And on sort of the nature of what Darren and I were just touching on, Alex came to us during the festival last year, the one that Alex Alvarez was on, and came in to just quickly do some edits on a thing, and he was there for 48 hours on a thing that we needed in a rush. And he came in with such a positive attitude and such a love for what he was doing and a passion for how can I, it was like, we didn't have any time, and it was just like, hey man, can you just cut this down so we can have it sorted? And not only did he sort it, but he made things from it. And he brought so much of himself to it that we were like, this guy is unbelievable. We don't have a position here, but how do we keep him? And I think in that name of how do you go be part of something, you bring of yourself to it, and everyone has their very special gifts, and when you do what Alex has done, you're undeniable, and it makes it it's one of my favorite things about my job and our thing that we're doing is that we get to have people like Alex around us, and we get to enjoy that. And I mean, one of my favorite things to do is walk around our office. We're in a big building with tons of different companies, and literally every single person is Alex's buddy.
And it has a secret handshake with him. I don't even know how you keep track of that many secret handshakes.
But yeah, that's Alex. Please make your own secret handshake with him. Yeah, yeah.
Should we, I feel like we can wrap this up and give high fives. And
Let's give high fives. I love high
keep
fives.
chatting, not on a stage where we get to actually
Get to see your eyes.
get to see
Yeah.
people.
Well, on that note, it is our great privilege to be here. This is a thing we don't take lightly, your attention and the opportunity to get to share insights and hopefully be part of y'all's lives as like you are part of ours. And getting to be part of the KitBash3d community and the visual effects and video games community at large has been one of the great honors of our lifetime. And I think that, though we're young into this space, where we go in this next decade is going to be really, really impactful for society. And I think this industry is about to get a whole lot more attention. Granted, it already has a lot. But I think that the use cases of what the things you all and we are learning to do together are about to be some of the most important things of our time. And it's about to get really, really, really exciting. It's also about to get really, really crazy. And I think if we can together look for ways to build better, if we can learn from the past and look forward and say, how do we create experiences for genuine human connection? How do we find our North Stars and connect them with other people? And how do we find our goals that matter for us and matter for people like us and do great things together? And by great things, I don't mean huge, important, by conventional things. I mean things that connect us. We talk a lot, very recently we've been talking about the chemicals in the brain that are triggered as you dive into things in front of a screen. And currently so many of those things are based off dopamine, and they're the mechanic that you get on Instagram when you pull, the same mechanic you get when you pull a slot machine and a little pinwheel, and what do I have? And it makes you nervous, and too much of it, and you become a little batty. And conversely, oxytocin, like Armando was talking about, is the thing that you get from human connection. With a baby, a newborn baby, literally, if it's not held for long enough, will die, because we as humans are predisposed to need human connection. And I think in this era, as we go into 12 hours a day in front of a screen, we have to really consciously think about what that means, and we have to really take responsibility of the things we're putting out into the world. And if we can do that together and learn from one another and work really hard to take responsibility of making that something special, like we were talking about, what kind of experience are you giving someone else? If we can consciously, with awareness, connect with one another through a screen, we have a good chance of avoiding the really toxic parts of this and connecting on the really great parts. And as we fold one decade into another, we couldn't be more excited to be part of this with you all.
I feel like you nailed it.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. Big thank you to Miranda and Alex Alvarez and Gnomon for putting this on. Awesome.